Morning everyone. So I'm going to try and do a bit of a watercolour. I haven't done one for a while, so it might crash and burn quite badly, but we'll see how it goes. I've just made like a little sort of preparatory sketch just to sort of as a starting point for the main figure, and to make some sort of decisions on background and lighting and things like that. So I want the idea to be that he's sort of stalking someone or something through like a snowy birch forest or a snowy forest, but with quite a nice warm low winter light at the back, hence why I've started to block in this yellow and then the blue, purpley blue of the shadows, so that I can sort of light him blue with like a quite a reddish orange sort of rim light hitting to pull out some accents, and but also get that nice thing of you can light them predominantly blues and blacks and purples, and try and get a little bit of that reflected blue light off the snow as well. So as areas of him will get closer to the snow, then you'll get a bit more bounce back off that blue light from the reflection of the snow. So that's the plan anyway. So I was just blocking in some colours there early on to try and sort of make some decisions on that stuff. And I'm working on a watercolour paper, or Archer's Aquarelle, really nice paper, smooth. I think it's Knot it's called. So it's really nice and smooth, takes the pencil well, and it's a very heavyweight one. This, like, I don't know if it's like 600 GSM or something. It's really can take quite a battering. So having blocked a little bit of that figure in, I'll probably, what I'll do is just go back over like I did before with the putty rubber in the last streams, and just sort of knock a bit of this, you can see it quite rough lines out, and go back in with a bit of detail with the pencil, but not too much. And I'm still undecided whether to pencil, watercolour, then ink, or pencil, just watercolour, or the other option is to just do pencil, watercolour, and then go back in with the pencil, or even coloured pencil, to sort of pull out some of the areas that I want to pull out. So I'm undecided on that yet, but we'll see. Just sharpening. Tools are very simple, so I've just got a little selection of brushes, 3 decent quality round tips, and then I've also got a flat that I use. Nothing special, just watercolour, Sable, Winsor and Newton, those two. That one is Kalinsky from Gesteka, which is from the Great Art website, and this is one of the Japanese brushes. Just check the questions a bit. Hi Tyler, hi Alwins. Yeah, first time to stream watercolour, I think, be strong. Coffee and live stream sounds good. I think I've just shown the tools, Farrell, so yeah. Good morning from Brazil. Hi, Fred. Michelangelo, I've been curious for a while, how many hours a day were you studying fundamentals? Once you decided to take art seriously and try to become a pro, you're an absolute lad. I think there's a certain amount of having to up my game when I went to Games Workshop and sort of working with a lot of super talented artists there. So you really had to up your game with the fundamentals, but also that was sort of done on the job, really, learning from other people and, you know, just trying to pick up like the stuff they did better than you and learn and copy, really. I've always advocated copying from people who are really good. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the way you learn. So that was one factor. And then, you know, I was really sort of big into the human anatomy stuff anyway, so that I was quite strong on that. So I'd say I've, you know, consciously drawing and studying maybe a couple of hours a day. As long as you do it sort of consistently, I think it's better to do an hour a day than 4 hours and then leave it for, you know, a week. Morning Samuel, morning Adam. Do you recommend any particular type of watercolour paper? Yeah, just mentioned that. I really like this one. It's at Archer's Aquarelle. Really nice paper, smooth finished. I think it's called Knot. And it just takes the pencil really well and seems to just handle quite. I'm not a super refined watercolour artist. I tend to batter it a bit into submission, so getting a good thick heavyweight paper is quite good for me. So this is actually 600 GSM. And I'm using just a nothing special watercolour set from Winsor & Newton, just pan watercolours. I've got a much nicer set that my friend Hyunjin gave me, a really posh sort of, I think it's Old Holland or something, all in a box, a pan set again, but I saved that for super special. I'm just trying to get not too much detail in, but enough to just, you know, make some sort of design decisions on this guy, and want to sort of really play up the fact that it's, you know, a cold environment, and try and get some of that into his you know, his clothing and stuff he's carrying with him. So I may do this over the next 2 days rather than try and rush and finish it today, and see how far we get. I mean, I'll do like I did the last two, just over an hour probably today, and then hopefully I can get it to a point where I can let the watercolour dry quite nicely and go back in and maybe refine and maybe try and make a bit of it look as awesome as Paul Bonner's work, who I mentioned the other day. If you don't know his work, you must check it out. He's an absolute legend of fantasy art, really, and he works exclusively in watercolour, I believe, from the tube, and puts it on quite thick, bit like you'd use gouache, but he's using watercolour, and the results he gets and the detail and the sort of narrative he manages to put into these beautiful scenes is, you know, next to none, really. It's really worth checking out. He's done a lot of work for initially Games Workshop, and then I believe he's done quite a bit for Magic the Gathering, and he's also one of the core artists with Cool Mini or Not, so he's working on a big project with them, which will be just stacked full of incredible artwork. So if you get the chance, check him out, definitely. Have you thought, Love Bistrom, have you thought of streaming making a Christmas card? The problem is I'm struggling for an idea for the Christmas card. I think I came up with one yesterday, and normally I would paint it in oils, but I'm thinking of doing it in ink and like a bit of wash technique this year. Just one, because deadlines are looming. Two, I haven't done a card like that, and I do quite like it as a sort of medium. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Or maybe I should just do an AI card, just feed my name in, and you know, Carl Kopinski Christmas card, see what it comes up with, save myself a job. Dan, hey. Yes, my pleasure, mate. I'll, as I say, try and mix it up a bit and do some different media stuff. So any suggestions worthwhile? Ellie McBride, morning from up north in Durham. Oh, lovely Durham. Yeah, nice place. I used to visit there near Finkel Abbey. Polish Arts, yeah, Archer's Hot Press is really good paper, really, you know, high quality stuff, really. Papa Joe, hey Carl, huge fan. Hope you don't mind, but usual works on Instagram. No problem, mate. I'm glad you like it. Enjoy the content. Hey Mark, how you doing, mate? Good to hear from you. Glad you're enjoying the videos. Bit of a wolf skin pelt going on there. Yeah, Bistrom, Krampus drinking with, but I've got to get my kids in there and keep it cute and, you know, tradition is since my son was born. Every year I've done a card with my son and daughter in. So I've done about, he's 13. I've done 13 cards. This year it'll be 13. Yeah, the card I'm sort of leaning towards. We've got quite a cool van here at home, like a Volkswagen camper. So I was thinking of doing a bit of a mashup of the scene from Harry Potter where they're flying the car, but my daughter's flying the car, our van, and my son's hanging out the side because it's the sort of thing he'd do, with a sack of presents, throwing them down to Santa on a rooftop. In fact, there's the sketch. So yeah, that's the initial idea. You get the gist of that. Trying to keep, I don't know if I did actually mention in the last stream, just I keep trying to pull back a little bit here because I'm wary that because of the lean on the drawing board, as it gets closer to you down at the bottom here, it's sort of inevitable, if you're not wary of it, that you'll end up with a bit of a scale issue. So the head might be small and the legs might be a little bit too big for scale. So worth bearing in mind, especially if you're working angled like this, that just keep cross-referencing your proportions of the figure. Trying to keep these lines. I'm not a neat drawer, but neater than usual, just to not muddy up the watercolours too much when I go in with them. I won't feed the demons, don't worry, Michelangelo. Alex Rodriguez, yeah, it's Paul Bonner. He's a sort of real old school GW artist who's gone freelance and worked on many projects. A lot of similar companies that I've worked with as I've left Games Workshop as well. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. Well, with just one of the ones I'm always looking at for inspiration, and sort of he's just, you know, he's one of those guys who you know exactly who the artist is the moment you see it, once you're familiar with it. And he's done a bunch of Magic the Gathering stuff as well, so if you want to sort of Google him and look him up. Yeah, pulled by the reindeers, maybe Bistrom, yeah. I do know Hugo Pratt, the piper and the drummer, yeah. I love his work. Really fantastic. Morning, Ryan. Dan, is there a place you can buy your Luca Games poster? I could probably run some copies off to sell, or do some giclée or something where it's a nice, you know, reproduction rather than just a standard digital print. Hey, Slavomir, Chesh, how you doing? Long time no see. Yeah, split screen bus on the card. You can't go with the classics, Rowdy. Yeah, and then it would need to be being pulled by the reindeers, wouldn't it, really? Because we all know that they look fantastic. But the moment you set out on that epic journey, they decide to revert to their temperamental selves, I think. Hey, Falls 3616, Alex, no problem. Farrokh, if you Google it, probably you'll find it. Kapinski Luca Games poster, kind of a steampunk themed guy with an airship in the background. Keep reminding myself to make these lines a bit tidier. D1 Dave, what is your process when it comes to sell multiple sketchbooks? What do you mean, as in printing my own books and selling them? If that's the case, what I tend to do is, well, the one that's I'm releasing on pre-order probably this week. I've worked is a bit longer than my usual book, so it's 200 pages rather than 150, I think. So to try and make up, because it's been a couple of years since I've released one. So I work sketching all year really to try and, well, to sketch mainly, not for the sole purpose of creating a book. And hopefully by the end of it I have enough to put a decent book together and the quality is good enough and that sort of thing. So then I've got a great friend who's a printer who runs a company in Nottingham where I live, a print and web company, and he's amazing because he does a lot of the groundwork for me and scans stuff and drops proofs off, and he lives quite close by to where I live, so that's handy in itself. And he scans them all. Then we go through, as I've been going through these past couple of weeks, and you sort of decide what's in and what's out. Once you've done that, come up with a page order, settle on the page order, return it to Sean from Nottingham Print and Web, who's doing the actual printing, and then he prints the covers and follows that up by printing all the sheets, binds them, and then we're good to go. So it's pretty painless process until you pay the bill for the printing. Unfortunately, with the current situation, the price of everything is gone right up, so we're trying to keep the cost that will be passed on to a minimum really, but it's, you know, it's almost doubled the cost of producing the book for us, so there will be a little rise. We're just working out how little we can make it without it being too much of an impact on you know, on myself and my wife sort of income. Hey Wasim, good morning from Morocco. Hey mate, good to hear from you. There probably won't do too much more drawing than that. Now, as you can see, when you go in with pencil, once you go over with the watercolour, it seals it in, so you can't really get rid of those lines. So you might see here, look, there's some lines on the background that have had a coat of watercolour on them, and they're just not moving now. So it's worth bearing in mind at this point, if you're going to have a go at this, as to what you want to stay in and what you don't want to stay in. Remember, you can always put this back in over the top of the watercolours, but you can't take it back out once you've put paint on. So just bear that in mind, you know, before you start to go in and paint your figure. Also start at this point, you start to think about light sources. So with this guy, obviously there's a light source behind him, quite a bright light source, and it's definitely got a hue to that light source, so it's an oranges and yellows. So I'm going to be predominantly working in blues and purples and quite a limited range of colours on the figure, just to really try and pull out that orange and reds when I start to put them in there. So, and then I'll fade this area out to sort of bluey, purpley, watercoloury loveliness. Hey Sam, thank you, mate. That's very kind of you. Bistrom, yes, I've done that before. I've underpainted in watercolour. So you can go in with watercolour, so pencil, watercolour, but the issue is there you must then seal the watercolour before you go on with the oils, because the oils will actually, if you leave it plain paper over time, they'll actually destroy the paper, I believe. I've not done it, not risked it, but that's what I've read. And also you'll have that issue that the terps will, or any thinner or mixer that you put in, will be kind of sucked into the paper, and it will affect the watercolour effect. So what you're better off to do is to go in, do your watercolour, and then, as I do with my a lot of my sort of commission paintings, I would then go in with a Liquitex matte medium and start to seal the whole painting like that. So a couple of coats of Liquitex matte medium should, seal all that watercolour work you've done in, and when you go in with oils, it gives you the option to be able to work in and out. And the nice thing with the matte medium, you can rub stuff away as well. So if there's an area in the watercolours that you really like and you maybe gone over in oils, you can always rub it back a bit. So that's what I'd advise. Okay, so I'm going to start to put some paint on the figure first. The reason I'm doing that is not just because it's the interesting bit, but I want to sort of, I'm not, I don't use watercolour enough to be really confident and sort of I still have to find the right mark. So what I'll tend to do is sort of go in with a general bluish tint like this to sort of set the mood, as it were, or the lighting cues. But it's got to be light enough, like on that skull there, that you're not knocking all the whites out. So bear that in mind as well with watercolour. Ideally you want to leave any highlights as the paper showing through. So I'm thinking of sort of general light on this figure, not too much of a specific direct light, and then I can sort of do that bounce light that I mentioned earlier as well with the snow. So like here on the face, I'll probably bring a bit more sort of pink into that. The nice thing is really if you work, you know, it's if you work sort of light to dark, you can layer a lot of this stuff up and, you know, always pull stuff back out with a bit of tissue or toilet roll as I'm using. And I tend to generally mix a bit of the colour of the you know, the fabric or whatever it is I'm painting, and then try to add enough blue to it for it to work in this you know, light that I'm trying to replicate. And then once you get towards these edges, you can, especially while they're still wet, I think it's a nice opportunity. So I'm going to have, you know, sort of reds, oranges where that light's coming in. It's a quite nice an opportunity to just start to bleed a bit of that into your blue while it's still wet. So that's a burnt sienna mixed with the cad red I've put in there, and I can just start to hint at that light. Quite useful for myself to start to, you know, organise things as well. And back in here to just pull a bit of that and just bleed it into the fur of his hat there. Arjun Datturi, yeah, comics. It would be great, but I don't know. I'm not a great comic artist. It's so labour intensive, and you know, I don't know if I'm good enough to do that. I've done them in the past for that was my first sort of paid work, really, was working for Games Workshop. They did a comic called Warhammer Monthly, obviously, and I worked on that almost exclusively for a couple of years, mainly on a character called that I was sort of helped to create alongside a really, really good writer called Gordon Rennie, who's worked a lot for 2000 AD and companies like that. So we developed a character called Cal Jericho. So that was my first foray into the labour-intensive world of comic books. Milliwigs, yeah. No, it's not a tea. I do fancy a tea, if any of you fancy making me one. 1 sugar, quite dark, just a drop of milk. But no, it's my watercolour pot. Remember to try and really work on, very much like as I mentioned with the oils, is spend a bit of time working on colour, on mixing your colour. Don't just pick it out of the pan and think, oh, that'll do, because you know it's going to be sort of especially when we're working in a limited palette like this, it's quite important to really sort of nail those colours. So what I'm going to do here is put a bit more purple, and you know, you can really push some of those hues with watercolour, because they do tend to go on quite bright and then they sink back into the paper a bit. So you know, work with a slightly higher chroma than you might think you need is another good tip, I think. And also, as I'm working on this figure that's sort of in the cold, cool shadows, so I'm thinking I want to sort of retain, you know, when I come to do any areas of real dark, I'll still make them a blue dark. Try and keep a real uniformity to the sort of colours that I'm using. And we're going to make this wolf pelt quite a light colour, maybe with a bit of sort of burnt sienna in there as well, just to give the pelt a bit of you know, those different hue changes. Well, thanks for the tea, Milliwigs. Jason, oh, my pleasure. As I say, I should have volume 7. And we're doing it on a limited pre-release, I think, because we were a little bit worried about people ordering and it not getting out for Christmas. So we're going to do, I think, a limit to the amount of sketched in books, just because they're the real time-consuming ones. So we'll probably release like 50 level up books with sketches in, so that I know that I can hit them all and get them out to post. And if we do that quick enough, maybe another 50, and then the rest I'll just do as signed, maybe 150, just so we don't take on too much here, and we can make sure that we are going to hit the sort of Christmas postage cut off as well. So that's the plan there. So as I said on the last stream, quite an advocate for sort of limiting my palette. So really on here I'm using like, I'm not sure of its exact colour, but it's like a cobalt type blue and some burnt sienna and a purple, wouldn't tell you the exact purple, alongside another dark blue that's probably like a more like an ultramarine, and working around those colours, and then a little bit of a sort of purplish red. I'm not sure what colour that would be. Maybe like a quinacridone red. And not trying to venture too much further away from those colours, just to limit yourself and also try to get a uniformity in there, you know, real sort of continuity of sort of palette, really. And also looking to try and keep some of that nice, you know, one of the joys of sort of working in watercolour is that it's got that lovely ability to do its own thing and, you know, kind of describe areas for you. So trying to look for that in what I'm doing as well, areas where I can let the paint do the sort of talking, as it were. I'm mixing quite carefully here to get a colour for or an initial colour for the flesh. That's a little bit too purple for my liking on here. So I brought a bit more red into it. And as I say, remember you can build this up in layers, so don't be too stressed if it's not perfect first time round. As long as you're working that kind of light to dark idea, just bearing that in mind every time you sort of put in another colour on, you can build up some nice effects. Especially, I think another thing that sometimes working without reference is sort of dictates how you can put the paint on in a way, because there's a certain extent you've got to find what you're looking for a bit more, whereas when you're working from a direct source, you can, you know, you see what you want to do, and then it's just a matter of putting it down in an interesting and sort of you know, exciting way. Whereas when you're working with out reference, you sort of always searching for the right thing a little bit, which is fine, but it does mean that it sort of dictates things to a certain extent, if you know what I mean. So here, obviously, I know I'm going to go a lot darker, especially down here, because a lot of that's in shadow, but it's just about also getting a bit of that sort of hue down as this one, as a bit of a visual reminder, and two, something that I can build up the colours with, so I can maybe add a bit more purple and blue to that and start to, you know, hint at areas that are in shadow, or try and make the figure look a bit more 3D. It's still looking very cold, I must say. I might have to remedy that at some point. Splinter sketch, what would you say the most overlooked fundamental of drawings by beginner artists? Probably not looking hard enough, I would say, at what you are trying to draw. So in that sense, it would be like someone says, draw a table or draw a chair, or a lot of beginner artists will just, they might not observe a table, they just seem to have an idea of what a table looks like in their head and draw all that. So what you get is a pretty bog standard looking table, but you need to observe and draw from these things to learn them, so it's about looking really hard at the subject matter and trying to work out, any design that's in there that you might not have noticed, perspective. So it's that idea of teaching yourself to look at things in a really sort of deep, concentrated way, rather than just either drawing what you think a table looks like, or take one look at it and think, yeah, I know what I'm doing now. You've got to teach yourself to be so observant, and that's quite a hard thing to do, I think, at first. But it's just that's the great thing as well. That's not something that's unteachable or unlearnable, to be able to concentrate and draw what you see in front of you is very learnable. It's just a high level of concentration. Sam Smith, I agree. Jungi's watercolour was underrated. His pen work, it was all about the pen work, but I'm sure he could have done anything really well that he chose to do, to be honest. If he went down the route of oils, he'd have been an amazing oil painter. I think he just found his sort of niche, and then people jumped on it and went crazy, really. Any new school artists that I particularly enjoy? There's a lot of the guys on the Super Annie team, a lot of, well, just too many really to mention, but there's like really love the pencil drawings of Elisa Ivanova. Gerald Perel is a monster, really good. Miss Jisoo, another amazing Super Annie artist who's, of that great ability of having real understanding of anatomical accuracy, and then rendering it in a minimal amount of lines really well. So she's good. The list just goes on, really. There's so many great artists out there. It's really inspiring, a bit intimidating sometimes, because some of them are doing stuff I just can't do, but that's good, Hello, Gorkum. Is it going to be just watercolours or gouache at the end? I think it could be watercolours. I may go in with some pencil or ink at the end. I'm not really sure yet. I'll see how I'm going, you know, see how it looks. So this is a area here of quite sort of dark shadow, whereas the furs behind are showing up, and I always think it's quite a nice opportunity to get, as I mentioned, some of that higher chroma stuff in there. So I've gone in with like a mix of blue and burnt sienna, but now I'm literally taking ultramarine there and dropping it in to just add a bit of interest and sort of watercoloriness into it. And then I'll do the same here, probably another area where the wolf pelt's hanging down behind. And another thing I learn and always like to try and incorporate is this idea here of lost and found edges. So if I can leave just a hint at the top of the belt there, I can lose the edge of it into the shadow. So you get that nice, you know, areas of, you know, sharp edge in contrast with lost edges. That's quite a nice thing to look for in these paintings. How can we improve imagination drawing Gork and Gull? I think the key is, as I said, you know, you've got to learn by observing first. That's the real key. You can't just be good at it without learning it from the source, if you know what I mean. So don't beat yourself up if you can't draw something from imagination without ever having observed it. You know, observe it first, and like I said earlier, in depth with a high level of concentration, and then you know, repeat that until you feel like you know you're starting to be sort of absorbed into your visual library. And then from there you can hopefully recall some of that and you know, use it in your repertoire. Again, trying to get this lost found lines here. So I've just pulled it out with a bit of tissue, and then I'll put it back in with the watery sort of colours. By putting the blue in underneath first, I think what you're also doing, especially if you're working like I'm doing quite quickly and wet on wet really. So by putting the blue in first, any colours that you put over the top are going to take that on. So, you know, you can try and retain that, you know, limited sort of palette that I keep talking about. Again, try and get some of that watercolory effect on the pelt here, rather than being tempted to go in and put all the lines in, you know, little hairs and stuff. Just try and let the paint do some of that work for you. A bit more burnt sienna on the pelt there, and then I'll pop a bit of blue in while it's still wet. Ultramarine here. Hello, littlest dumpling. How's your day going so far? Good. Well, I'm painting and chatting to you lovely people, so it's a great start to the day. Socrates, hey mate, how you doing? Hope you're well. Nick Runge, yeah, fantastic watercolour artist. Sam Smith, I know his work well, yeah, really good. Andy, do you have any tips for painting with acrylic inks? So long since I've used them, Andy. It's, I don't know, they're a funny one because I think I struggle with them a little bit because they're until you really know the medium well, they can be a bit like, I find them hard to work with because you get some which are really translucent and really don't go on thick, or they don't have great coverage. They're more like a translucent ink, and then others which have got a bit more body to them and they go on and cover everything underneath. So I've struggled a bit with that when I've used them. They can be, until you know them really well, I think, and you've worked with them extensively, they can be quite tricky to work with, I've found. El Ingeniero, who's your biggest influence? I couldn't honestly say one person really. There's so many important artists that I've worked with, and also I've been lucky enough to meet, and also just stare at in art galleries. So there's no one influence that was the main one. I guess my parents were quite a big influence because they were both are both very creative. So they drew a lot when I was a kid and made clay figures of Native American Indians, and my mum is a very good hand knitter, So, you know, it was quite a creative sort of environment to grow up with. My brother's really good at drawing as well, to Stefan Kapinski. He's really, you know, talented, and my sister's a musician as well, so it was a sort of quite a sort of creative environment. So that was probably the biggest influence initially. And then as far as artists go, I would just list endlessly the amount of artists I've looked at and seen, and tried to take some of it away and incorporate into my work. There's too many to sort of even start on this stream, I think, you know. Maybe I need to come up with a key, you know, these are my top 10. I think I'd even struggle with that. Guess also, I think, you know, my sort of family inspire me now. My wife and kids are, you know, the reason I create and sort of want to keep creating is just as much about them as anything else, you know. They give me a lot of sort of drive and inspiration and help, and my wife's really good at sort of the making things happen that I'm not very good at making things happen, so that's nice in itself. Favourite art-focused documentary or programme to watch? No, not really, no. There's nothing that I would say, you know, I sort of... I saw a couple of good ones, you know, like one about Lucian Freud that was really good, and, you know, obviously I love his work, so... but there's nothing in particular that jumps to mind. I do have a lot of books, an awful lot of art books. They're quite a resource for me. I still haven't unpacked a lot of them since we moved into this place, so they're in the garage at the moment, but not so much documentary series, I don't think. Did you ever play Assassin's Creed Black Flag? Well, I did. I bought it, obviously, because without sort of, I did the artwork. I did a lot of, well, quite a bit of design work on the Edward Kenway character. So I did buy the game. I didn't play it an awful lot. Then my son got his hands on it and finished it in, like, I don't know, a week. And then every time I tried to have a go, he told me how bad I was at it. And, you know, so I felt a bit discouraged and disheartened. Great game though. I mean, we were playing it just the other day on Xbox One, so not the 360 it was released on, and I mean, graphics look a bit dated and it's a bit clunky, but still holds the test of time, you know. Pirates fighting, can't really go wrong, can you? Oh, Kipling, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's not nice, is it? Not nice getting hit by a car. You get back to it though, just steady, slow, steady steps to recovery. Can't rush it. Oh, check that Rockwell documentary sounds interesting. I'd like to see that. Yeah, definitely. Especially with the Christmas card looming, always look at Rockwell around this time of year. So good at those. Hey Jason, yeah, I did some work on Valhalla as well, on the DLC for it. So I did a bunch of work on the sort of must spell the lead characters and the you know, standard enemy types. It was good fun. Thanks, Alexandra. Yeah, if you like the live stream, give it a like, share, subscribe, blah blah, all that stuff. All helps. Tell your friends. Although, probably if you're on here, you don't have that many friends if you're anything like me. Locked in a room, drawing things all day long, and then when you're not drawing things, thinking about the things you should be drawing. Yeah, it's cool, Jason, working on the game. So I've worked on other games that have been a lot less, not enjoyable, but lot less pleasurable to work on. In the team that I was working on with were just fantastic. They just gave me so much freedom, and you know, they just wanted me to do my thing really, which is, you know, a great honour, and you know, realise how lucky I am to be in that position. So they're really good bunch of guys. And then also, you know, it's pretty cool to get a copy of the game and sit down, like I sat down with my son and we played it and got the download, and because I knew that I was going to be working on it not that long after the game was released, I think. So when the DLC came out, we got my sketches and drawings and sat and compared how closely they'd used them, and they'd used them really closely. Actually, it was one of the games where I was like, wow, these are you know, pretty much exactly what I drew. So that was good as well, because you feel like you've really sort of done your job properly, you know, not had to revise anything really. So it was cool. Thanks, Socrates. Yeah, telling the customers I like it. Sam, we are looking into adding a bit more merch. The prints maybe we'll start to do a few more of as well, because they're quite successful, and also we don't have to do a huge print run, whereas with the books it's like really to make it work you need to shell out the cost of printing maybe 1,000 initially, so that's quite a big outlay in that we're self-publishing. So prints and things like that are a lot more doable because we can the guys I work with at Nottingham Print and Web are really, you know, flexible, so they can I can get a couple of print orders, drop Sean a line at the place and just say, oh, you know, I've just sent you a couple of orders through, and we get them printed to order a bit more, so there's not such a big sort of financial kick from that, whereas with the books, you know, it's like really you're looking at, you know, having to print 1,000, you know, it's, I don't know what the price will be this time, but you know, it's a significant outlay really. And t-shirts we thought about doing, but it's about finding something, a balance of like getting something that feels really good quality, even, you know, fabric wise, and printing quality as well. You don't want them to be fading and sort of after a couple of washes, so we're still trying to work that one out a little bit. I don't even know if people will buy t-shirts with my drawings on. I don't know. Did you know Space McQuirk at Games Workshop? Yeah, James, I knew him well. He's a lovely guy. Yeah. Phil Moss as well. Yeah, Chris, he's a cracking artist. Really good. Alexandra, did you ever study with box mannequins or simple boxes? A little bit. I've done a little bit of that sort of thing, and I still try to bear it in mind when I'm drawing the figure in perspective. You know, I try to think of the box and your eye level and those sorts of things. I don't use the mannequins so much. I think I just think I've got quite a good sort of handle on physiology, human sort of anatomy and physiology. So in a way, working with the mannequins, sort of, I get a bit bogged down with them, and I lose some of that freedom and flow that I can get when I'm working without them, because I think I'm quite good at anatomy, as it were, so I don't work with those much at all. Okay, t-shirts, yeah. Okay, we did have an idea. I did a drawing quite a long time ago of an astronaut eating a pizza in space, that we were just going to do a print of t-shirts called Space Pizza. So maybe I'll look back into that at some point and try and get my organisational skills on the go again, although it'll be Tara, my wife, who does the organising really. I'm not good enough at that. So I can see already I'm not going to get this finished, obviously, on this live stream, but we'll get it to a point, I think, where I've done a first pass of the colours, and hopefully tomorrow I can build up on them, and not tomorrow, Friday, sorry, I'll build up on them and start to layer up some of this details into the character. Okay, t-shirts would be cool. I would buy those t-shirts. I would buy any t-shirt. Okay, I think I get the message. I'll try to do it. Yeah, that's a good idea as well, Sam. Add them onto the book sales. Yeah, good idea. How do I paint snow? We will see in Munch Dave. Hopefully, I don't know. I'm going to do it in washes, build up. As you can see, I've stayed very pale here because I want to work back into that. I don't want to put too much sort of tone down and darken it too early, so that I've got something to work with when I go back in with other layers. It's also nice to consider having a bit of a pop of colour in these. So it still has to be muted by the blue, but you know, here, like a reddish scabbard. Maybe some sort of gold or brass on the, you know, metalwork a little bit as well, just to bring some colours in. All of them you'll have to consider will be affected by the light, so we're trying to stick with this purpley blue just to get the orange really popping behind. And then let's see, as I mentioned before, you can bring a little bit of, so we're going to have a bit of red pop off there from the yellow light behind, and just a little bit of water to run it into the existing colour. Is there any way to get the big Kapinski for less than $150? I'm speaking to my, because I work with a different publisher on that called Correct Editions. So really great bunch of guys out in Strasbourg, actually, in France, near the German border. And they were really good to work with. And I think they may have some copies left. So I did speak to them about potentially getting a few, like maybe 100 off them, and putting them on my website, and they would be maybe lower than $150, I would think. I'm not sure of the exchange rate. Depends where you are, Noah, really. I think we sold them here in UK for 90. Was it 70? Maybe 70 actually. So they're a big old book. They're essentially my volume 1 and 2 collected together, with about an extra 90 pages or 50 pages of colour work, for mainly done for Cool Mini or Not. They're a nice format, big, big book, but yeah, 150 I understand is pricey. How does work for Adam Hilton? How does work for games companies work? They request character concepts that they pass on to the final game designers, then they develop further, or do they often use your designs? Like, mostly in my experience, it's been the former. So it depends where you come in on the project as well. Sometimes you're in really early doors, so you know that everything is probably going to get changed, or not changed, but sort of modified and adapted, and sort of will just develop over the course of the game. These things usually take a couple of years to really get refined and the thing released. So other stuff, like where you come in on a DLC like that, like I did on Valhalla, I think it's a bit of a quicker turnaround. A lot of the stuff's already set in stone for the guys at the companies. They know their limits, what they've got to work with, and so they can be a bit more specific about what they want from you. So in that sense, it's quite a nice way to work. You've got a bit more, not that you're restricted, but you've got a much better idea of what's going in, what it's going to be used for, what you sort of parameters you're working within. So I think that's why there was so much that they put in that was so close to what I'd done. A lot of this stuff was already quite well decided upon beforehand. Curious to know, Carl, did you have a point when you stopped looking at other artists' work and possibly kept it from influencing style? Sometimes I've obsessed about one or two artists to the point of it becoming sort of negative, that at some point you have to go, okay, I just can't do this like they do it, and that's fine. Who wants to be a clone of another artist anyway? Who wants to, what you want to do is learn from them and then incorporate it into what you do, and hopefully have something that's an interesting sort of mix of influences and styles anyway. So in that sense, I maybe step back from stuff when I'm starting to really obsess, or really get bogged down with the fact I can't do it like they do it. Yeah. Noah, how would someone go about buying a design for a tattoo? I don't know, I get asked quite a bit, and I just don't really have the time for doing that at the moment. I've got a whole bunch of projects on the go and stuff that I've put on hold and other stuff that I'm having a break from for a month, and so to take on a tattoo design is quite because that's going on someone's skin for forever. It's quite stressful. Now that I wouldn't be happy just doing a drawing and going, there you go, you know. Hey, Herax. George, thank you, George. Ina, thank you. No, you can't tattoo a throwaway practice drawing, mate. You've got to have something a bit more, I don't know, finalised, surely. Adam, on pencil or ink, how do you decide on what features to fully design versus those you leave open to interpret, not interpretate, sorry. I tend to look for areas of focus, so obviously often that'll be the face for me, just because I like drawing faces and I think they're sort of key to my sort of style, I suppose. And then really it's a choice made on the fly really a lot of the time, in that you want to look at how the drawing or painting is sitting in its environment and what the influences of the environment are around it. You know, it's the things crossing in front of your character, different elements such as trees like this, or are they all behind? So things like that can inform those sorts of decisions. And then sometimes I think when you come to do textural stuff like maybe chainmail and things like that, you don't want to overcook it with that stuff, because you can sort of make the details sort of muddy it a little bit if you're not careful. So I tend to treat those areas quite quickly and minimalist wet, as minimal a way as possible. Around the legs, I'll often sort of, depending on how much movement you're putting in, but they can be quite loosely done if they're running, or if there's some movement there. So things like that are quite useful techniques. Even when I'm doing these eyes here, I'm trying to keep a little bit of more of that blue in the bounce light sort of idea. So it's bouncing up onto his face. So I'll do sort of purple there, but I want a bit more blue showing underneath the nose. It's quite hard to do with oils. It's with watercolours, much easier to do with oils, I think, but you can get it to work if you're careful, which I'm not sometimes. Again, put a bit of brass work or something on here just as a pop of colour and interest. I think I'll add a bit in there as well. It would be nice to see work with the palette and colours too. I can show you the palette without it dripping on here. Yeah, James Gurney's a good one. Lord of Tempest, yeah. Definitely, he's got a couple of really good books. Colour and Light is one that I came back to an awful lot when he first released that. That was a really quite an informative and useful book for me. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I've been streaming for a fair while now. Yeah, just over an hour. 45 actually, so we'll come back to this. I'll zoom in for you so you can see what progress I've made here. So it's like a first pass really, trying to get stuff tied down, and I may go in, as I said earlier, with inks or pencils back over the top. I'm not sure at the moment, but you get the gist of like, that's how I'd start these sorts of watercolours. So there you go. As you requested, a bit of watercolour painting, really putting the pressure on me now. Yeah, the books are all on my website for anyone who's interested at the moment. I've only got volume 6 in stock, and that's running low. So, but volume 7 is very imminent, very imminent. So keep your eyes peeled if you're interested. It's a bigger book, and I think the content's pretty good. So, and thanks for following, liking, subscribing. Do appreciate it all, and thanks for your support. More importantly, it's greatly appreciated and still very humbling, I must say. So thank you all for showing such interest in what I do. It's makes all the difference. And we'll be back on Friday, same time, 9:30 UK time, and try and get this taken to a next level and finalised and sort of, tidied up a bit. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Take care. Happy Wednesday. See you Friday.